Welcome to another episode of The Conversation. If you are joining us for the first time, this show is here to stimulate wide and diverse discussions on the many topics that are of national importance. This nationally televised show will dive into many issues and will not shy away from the truly sensitive ones we have avoided for far too long. So we are offering this platform to have the conversation. I am your host, Carla Barnett. For most of us, the coronavirus pandemic has changed the way we eat, pray, learn, work, and socialize. Many people have lost loved ones, lost their jobs or sources of income, lost their normal routines of everyday life, and have had to adjust to new routines. All this has not come without stress, anxiety, depression, and other emotional and mental challenges. Tonight, we will be discussing the effects of the pandemic on our mental and emotional well-being and ways in which we can try to cope with the challenges. Our team took to the street to find out how the pandemic has been affecting Belizeans. Let's take a look.
How has the pandemic affected you?
This affecting me because in the work, you have to stop to work. When to go buy groceries, you have to make line, have to wait, and then everything go too slow.
You can't enjoy yourself. We got face thing over your face, and we can't take that thing off like before. So we have to go by the law, no?
It may affect me so far, but I don't take vaccine yet. But I think I need to take it at first time.
Devastatedly, in many ways, financially, economically, scientifically, naturally. You say it affect me.
Have you faced any specific challenges during this pandemic period?
The economic it gone down, so it's a big problem. You can't feel free for go out and for go visit the family, and you can do nothing.
Every day I have to find money for catch bus and come on back. Sometimes we don't have money for catch bus or something like that. And everything they raise and your pay, it not go up, it go down, they cut your pay.
I good at everything. And I got no stress, nothing like no stress.
What has messed you up the most about the pandemic?
I got no problem with the lockdown. I like the lockdown because it's dangerous to go out.
The lockdown stress me more than most because you can't come out like before. And then you have to go in exact time, 7:30, before that.
The only thing I mess me up sometimes because I take my little drink, smoke my little cigarette. Well, apart from that, no problem.
What have you done to try and cope with the challenges brought on from COVID?
Yes, I talk with my family, and I watch the news and watch my friends in a video calls, my family, only that.
Well, I have to get up and work, I get myself active, not be lazy or nothing. I still move around.
I drink my rum, smoke my cigarette, then say, if I drink my rum, COVID don't catch me. But COVID catch you anytime.
I pray to God every day for health, strength, and spiritual blessing that I could survive and prosper.
That was a quick snapshot of the different ways people have been affected by this pandemic. Our first guest tonight will share his personal experience. Paul Schmidt is an entrepreneur and social activist. He is very outspoken about issues that affect people in our society. And for the purpose of our show tonight, we hope for him to also be outspoken about the issues that have been affecting his mental health, if any. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you, Doctor.
Great to have you with us tonight. Can you share with us how your life changed because of the pandemic? What's been very different?
Obviously, well, when it first took place or when it first happened, the staying at home part, it's something that I'm not used to. I think most people, especially Belizeans, we Crawford, we like move about. You know, we want to be in the scene, and so it was very unusual to hear when government or when the authorities said, you know what, it's time to stay home. It's new, and you don't know what to expect next. So I had to learn how to be in very confined space for like with myself and with my family, you know, especially because we're moving, but we're moving about together, and the scenery changes each time. You know, so that is what we're used to. But when you're in that small space, you kind of have to like look for a new room each hour.
So you're the confining, the staying in a small space and not being able to move around. What effect did this have on you mentally, emotionally? How did it change you? What did you need to do differently?
I definitely had to find the good in a lot of what is around me. One of my escapes was definitely you had to eat at home a lot. But one of my escapes was definitely trying to, and I love the kitchen anyway, but I never had the time.
Right.
Because I'm busy with business, but I kind of had to relearn to like love the kitchen again, you know, and so to be in the kitchen. So I was putting out there, I'm making Johnny cakes or tortillas or Chinese style chow mein, or so, you know, the way how I like it.
Eating more.
So I was eating more, definitely. What I've noticed, for me, I've always struggled. I have as you can see, evidently, I have a relationship with food, a very bad one, you know, whereby I try to, food is my coping mechanism.
Okay.
You know, so that's how I cope with things. So being in a confined space then makes it more accessible to.
Right, and so you were cooking more.
So I was cooking more, eating more, you know, so that happened. I've always been a very hefty guy, but it happens even more when you're locked up.
When you're locked up.
Yes.
Okay. In the early days of the pandemic, when we were reacting to an evolving crisis and not understanding the extent of it, did the news of new cases and the deaths that we had, did that have any effect on you?
It did. Initially when it happened, or when I was concerned, and I've been listening to the news, especially from my older sister, where she has been following it since before, like since January. But I was not as concerned until what really pushed me over the edge was when, and it all ties in for me, or where my anxiety grew, was with business. And so I found when we came closer, when it was evident that we had to lock down, and when these numbers were rising up bit by bit, I was like, immediately I could see that business is going to go down, and then my anxiety just spiked. You know, so, and that's when I had to I had to live day by day, in most cases week by week, because every week it was evolving.
Right.
Every week it was an evolving, it was just, you know, over and over.
You mentioned the financial stress. How did you handle that?
Financially, I made the decision to say, I'm not going to be too stressed about it, because it's going to be there, and I think that happens for most Belizeans. That was that's one of the things that add to a lot. The pandemic gave light to a lot of what we don't have in Belize, social, you know, safety nets and what have you.
Social safety nets,
right? You know, and so I realized, I said, you know what, I'm going to either, because I've been down the road before where I have been depressed because of financial situations, which was a horrible place for me, where I have a cat. I've always had cats, and I would let the litter box just pile up, and I would just. It was one of those horrible depressions, and I said, I don't want that for myself again. So I have to make a decision. What am I going to do about it? And so I just said, you know what? The banks are obviously going to call. You know, your lenders are going to call you to pay up with your bills and to be constant. I was trying to pay attention to the news when, you know, when the then Prime Minister said, you know, we're going to ask like BEL to take their time with P, you know. And I said, that is what I'm...
And even the banks to ease
up.
Yes.
And I tried to take as much opportunity as possible, or take advantage of that. So when the banks called me, I said, play that shit. I said, me no got your money. I can't do nothing. And that was for my own mental health, because if I had dwelled on it, I'd have gone
Right.
crazy, or worse, I would have
Okay.
hurt myself. You know.
Okay, and know that there's a slow opening.
There's
Are
a
you seeing?
there's a slow opening, and I will be very honest. I still, because bills will never go away. They always say there are
Right.
two things you have to do: that they don't pay tax.
Right.
I owe tax right now, but I am not letting it bother me. I'm taking my
Right.
time with it, because I can't pull water from a rock.
Right.
You know, so I can
right.
only work with what I have.
Right.
So I'm going.
But
as-
you do keep in
I
communication,
keep it, yeah.
right?
And I tell my lenders that, just for my own, mental health. I say, you know what, I'm letting you know that this is where I'm at,
Right.
and this is how I'm going to deal with it. I say it has nothing, and I'm not running away at all from you. I'm just letting you know. So when I go to BEL, my bill could be $100 for light, because we had to stay locked up. They had a
Right.
time when light just made a skyrocket.
Right.
Then I hear what? I know they get $50 a week until how I go. And you had to live off your savings. So we had
Right.
to, I had to stretch all of
Right,
that.
companies like BEL has
Were
made
very
a
kind.
policy decision not to
Yeah.
disconnect people, and that was really very helpful.
Yes.
So but it still stresses people when they see the bills.
Yeah, when they do, and
when they see the
my
bills,
advice to
yes.
people is to just, not to worry too much about it.
What is the biggest lesson you had from this experience so far?
I can't believe I've been so patient with myself so far. I really can't believe it.
I'm sure there are many other people going through this kind of experience that you've had. What kind of advice would you leave with them? Do it the way you did?
I think take it one day at a time. That's really what it boils down to. Meditate as much as possible. Try to
Okay.
find what makes you feel safe.
And focus on that, and
focus
not
that.
on the negative.
And not on the negative,
Right,
correct.
right. Okay. Thank you very much, Paul, for being so candid with us tonight. Please continue to stay safe. You're telling me that you've been doing your vaccinations
Yes.
and being very careful about your social distancing and all that, and that's very good. So continue to do that, and good luck on the business. I know your business is beginning to grow again, so we wish you well with that as well. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you. Our next guest. Our next guest holds a master's in social work and is a macro practice social worker with concentration in clinical, community, and policy practice. Sean Vargas has been a public officer for 20 years and is currently in the Ministry of the Public Service as the coordinator for the Employee Assistance Program. This relatively new program serves the entire public service and focuses on the well-being, mental health, and welfare of public officers to assist them to perform effectively at the workplace. Good evening and welcome, Sean.
Good evening and welcome. Thank you very much.
Okay, can you start off by telling us a little bit about the Employee Assistance Program?
Right. The program is designed for public officers, specifically public officers countrywide. We serve the uniform organization, the military and the police department, the Coast Guard. And we implemented the program was in 2015.
Right.
Cabinet gave approval for the program in 2014 and implemented in 2015. We have been around since then, and we're trying our best to grow the program and to introduce the importance of mental health and let people know that public officers know that this program is available for you.
Okay.
It's free of cost.
Okay, I know that traditionally Belizeans tend to shy away from opening up about anything to do with mental or emotional health. Is that changing? Are we seeing more people reaching out for help now, especially with the pandemic?
To a certain extent, yes. We have seen a significant increase in referrals from public officers. And speaking to my colleagues, we had a quick conference. We sat down a couple of days ago and talking about since the pandemic, what we have been seeing, and indeed there are individuals getting access, coming in for services, no?
Okay.
That component where we look at therapy as taboo is slowly depreciating.
Okay. In your position, I'm sure you are familiar with many examples of how persons are affected by the pandemic. Can you tell us some of the biggest challenges people are facing?
At this point, what we are seeing is a high level of anxieties, and
Okay.
those who have been with us, who we received contact with or we made contact with since the start of the pandemic, those who are affected, public officers who are affected
Right.
directly, when we make contact with them, some of the things that they talk about, a high level of anxiety. A couple officers spoke about when they received that that all clear, or the final test that showed that they were COVID free, they
Right.
went on a binge.
Okay.
Alcohol consumption, food consumption. Like, I beat this.
What
Remember,
other
this-
kinds of behaviors have resulted from these kinds of challenges?
From what we have seen, only those who were affected, those who were infected,
Right.
have given us that report, that feedback of
Okay.
the binge behavior. And I guess it's part of that early phase of the disease, when we believe that, okay, you have COVID, you're going to die, or you have COVID, the possibility to get over it is significantly low. I think we were not knowledgeable about the virus at that time.
Right, and we've all learned a lot about it, and some of the long-term impacts on the physical body. What about on the mental, the emotional health?
Going into the emotional component, the mental health, as I mentioned before, public officers are reporting the high levels of anxiety.
Right.
High level of anxieties, and this extra avenue to be a little more precautious, be more cautious, be careful of what you do, or who you talk to, or what you're doing, and who you're talking to, your distance. So those things are now heightened.
And it's beginning to be very much internalized, I'm suspecting.
Definitely.
Right. Do you find any difference in how women react as opposed to how men react to the anxiety and the challenges they are facing?
Well, quite honestly, the men who are a part of the program, basically have that mentality that, all right, you know what, I got it, I beat it, and I'm good. I'm not too worried anymore. The caring component is mostly from the women. Women are the ones who are taking that extra precaution.
Right.
They're taking that extra precaution, because I think there's still that mentality that, you know what, I caught it, and I don't think I can get it anymore, because my body is immune. That I don't know how real the herd immunity is now, but that is the process that somehow we have, some of the men.
For those persons who are feeling overwhelmed, anxious, what advice do you have for them? There is one thing to encourage people to seek help, but are there enough affordable services for people who may need counseling? What can people do?
Definitely. In Belize, the Ministry of Human Development operates the Community Counseling Center. And the Community Counseling Center have counselors who are stationed in Belize, and on a weekly basis, they rove to different districts.
Right.
The Employee Assistance Program, we are a program where our target population is specifically for public officers.
Right, serving public officers, right.
Yes, we serve only public officers, but we have a cadre of practitioners countrywide. About 30 something, just about 30 30 practitioners at graduate degree level to serve public officers countrywide. There is also the Ministry of Health, the mental health unit, who have trained psychiatric practitioners, psychiatric nurse practitioners, who will make effort to support any Belizean in need.
Thank you so much, Sean, for sharing such valuable information on government's employee assistance program, as well as the services that are offered to the general public. That service is even more relevant during this pandemic time. Thank you for being on the show this evening. Viewers, we will pause for our first ad break, and when we return, we will be discussing how the pandemic has been affecting children and teens. and welcome back to The Conversation. I am your host, Carla Barnett. Tonight we are discussing the stresses of the pandemic and how it is affecting people and how people can cope. We had a conversation about the impact on adults in the first segment, and now we want to switch to children and teens. We decided to check with some children to hear in their own words what it has been like being at home and away from school. Let's take a look.
I miss being in school because I want to see my friends, and I think online school is boring. Like, I think it would be more fun to be in school.
I do miss being in school because I miss my teacher and my friends.
I miss being in school because I can be with my friends and my teacher can teach me the questions forward.
I'm happy at being at home all the time, but sometimes I get bored and there's not much to do.
At home, sometimes it gets boring because there's not really much to do.
The reason why I don't want to stay home is because school at home is kind of hard because your parents don't get the information from the teachers. They get it from your paper or your internet.
I miss being with my friends and playing in the yard.
I miss most about school, my teacher, my friends, the fun of learning.
Mostly the thing I miss about the school is my friends and the yard because it has a big yard and you get to play.
Homeschooling is, yes, I'm not easy for me because my mom and my dad works all day and sometimes I have to do my work by myself.
Homeschooling is easy because I can just if I don't know an answer, I can find the answer in my book.
The teachers teach you more easier and like your family members don't know too much about the school.
The best thing about being at home is that I have more time to be with my family and I have no distractions when I'm doing my school. I have more time for my school.
You get to go anywhere and you can eat your lunch very early or very late. You can play on your gadgets and you can finish your homework. You can do arts and crafts and anything.
The best thing about being at home is I don't have to get up early. I don't have to do work every day. I get to do whatever that I want if my mom and my dad approves. It gets extremely bored if you do one thing over and over and over.
The worst thing about being at home is that it's boring. Most of the time, it's boring.
It's because you get bored because you're just gonna sit in your house. Sometimes you can go play, but it's because you play the same game every day.
I now welcome Kaylee Young to the show. Kaylee is a counselor at the Ministry of Education. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Psychology and is currently pursuing a Master of Science degree in Psychology. Thanks for joining us tonight, Kaylee. Thanks for being here. Kaylee, as you heard in that clip, most children are missing their friends, their teachers, and the school structure. What are the ways being out of school has affected these children?
Hi, I just want to say thanks for having me and having such an important conversation. And as you heard from the clip, being out of school is certainly affecting children in various ways. One such way is the lack of social interaction. So kids are not in school, and so some kids don't have other peers to play with or to hang out with, and so that social interaction has been removed due to the pandemic. And because of the removal of that social interaction, it can negatively affect a child's emotional well-being. Also, children rely heavily on routine. And so being out of school, they have essentially lost that routine. And when they go to school, they know what's happening. So every day, schools have a timetable and a schedule, so kids know what will happen on Monday at what time, what will happen on Tuesday at such time. They don't have that routine now.
Till they've lost structure.
Yes, they've lost structure, which is very difficult for them because that's what children essentially rely on. Another way that it has affected them as well is that for some children, school is a safe place. So it's a place where they can go to vent. They might have a teacher or they might have friends that they feel comfortable to confide in, and now they don't have that. They might not have that communication. For some, they have cell phones. They can still text their friends, go on Facebook, talk. But for others who don't have that luxury, it's hard. So they have gone from having a safe place at school to now being at home confused, becoming stressed.
Unstructured.
How
has this affected their schoolwork?
Again, it has affected because of the lack of routine that they rely so heavily on. So at school, you know you're going to school to learn for an education. You're going to be sitting in this chair behind this desk doing this work, or you're going to be having activities outside such as PE. And so now that's not there. At home, that might not be the case for them. So it's very difficult for a lot of them. And a common theme that you have heard in the clips just now is they're bored.
They're bored. They're not doing the schoolwork the way they normally would, and they're not doing all the other things that would have been around the schoolwork.
Exactly. That's involved in a school setting, not just the academic part, because there are other components of a school setting that they are missing out of as well.
What has been the impact on the parents of this? Because parents are now working and managing the school process as well at home. So what's been the effect on parents?
It has had a major effect on parents, and I can speak on this as a counselor and also a parent. So now parents have to now wear a separate hat. They now have to put on that teacher hat. Not saying that, you know, on a regular time they won't be teaching their kids, because children go to school and then when they go home, parents essentially help them with homework. Yes, and with projects, but now they have to be doing that full time. And here you can see where the problem comes in, because not everyone is a born teacher. As parents, we learn as the day goes by, we learn how to parent, but sometimes it takes that special gift.
And many parents have the experience of trying to teach children to do mathematics in the way they learned it, and it's changed, and so it can be quite confusing. I've had some of my own friends tell me that they have a difficulty because the teaching modalities may have changed since they were in school, and you know, they're not teachers.
Exactly. And it's especially difficult too for a parent who has several children in the household at different levels. So if you have a child in infant 1, you have one in standard 3, you have one in high school, it's different. So now you have to be managing those 3 levels. The one in high school may not need as close supervision as the one in primary schools, but they still need supervision. And so it becomes hard, especially for parents who work.
Exactly. What about the impact of the pandemic itself? Hearing all the negative news on the TV and on the radio about the people who are ill and the number of deaths, and has that affected the children as well?
Most definitely. So the pandemic, you can call it a traumatic event. And what we usually advise parents and teachers to do after children experience a traumatic event is to limit their access to the media. Because sometimes, you know, the media over-sensationalize what's happening. And so it becomes hard, because even as adults, we watch the news and we see those large numbers of COVID cases or deaths.
Right.
At that point, we're not thinking about the deaths in relation to the size of the population. We're just seeing deaths. And that's the same thing with children. They're just seeing deaths. So they become fearful and they become stressed about that because they start to think, okay, if one of my family member contracts the virus, that essentially leads to death.
To death, exactly. A lot of families, we saw in our earlier segment, families experiencing financial loss, stresses because one or both parents have lost their jobs. And I'm thinking that must have been heavily impacting the children as well. They must be worried about all of those things.
Indeed. One thing that we have to keep in mind is that children mimic adult behavior.
Okay.
And they rely on adult responses. And then sometimes they take on the stresses of their parents or their guardians. And it's a lot of stress for them to bear and for them to handle. So let me give you an example. Let's say a child who probably usually eats maybe 4 slices of bread for breakfast. Hearing the conversation between their parents or their guardians about only one parent is working, they have to cut back on certain things. Without them telling the child this, the child automatically thinks, okay, I need to cut back. I need to do things differently. So now that parent may still give that child 4 slices of bread for breakfast, but that child may limit themselves to 1 or 2.
Or man may feel guilty.
Or may feel guilty about eating.
Right. Speaking about the children in primary school in particular, what are some of the lessons that we have learned about handling all of this around our children?
Well, one lesson I would say that we have learned is the part about routine. We have always known that children rely heavily on routine, but when we're so accustomed to something, we don't see the importance. But when we take that away, that's when we realize how important a role plays, like having a routine.
Right. So it's not only the fact of not being physically at the school, it's all of the routine that goes along with it. So you know exactly where you're supposed to be at every time of the day, and that has lost. So
Exactly.
so children are in a sense destabilized.
And so it also comes back to the teams emerging from the clips being bored.
Right.
At school, they have structure.
Even though it's the same thing they do every day.
Exactly. Exactly, that's right. But they know what's happening.
They experience it as boredom because they don't know now what to do with this time. So they sit and they wait, and or they get into mischief, and that sort of thing. Yes. Where can parents go if they need help with getting and providing mental and emotional support to their children? Primary school age children we're talking about.
Okay. Well, what they can do, they can first check with their child's school and check with the principal to see if the child's school has a counselor.
Right.
And then if they do, then the school will arrange for that counselor to talk to the child or the child and the parent.
Okay.
If the school doesn't have a counselor, then the principal would know what other areas or avenues parents can use to get that help
Have
for
parents
themselves.
been reaching out for this kind of help?
Yes, parents have been reaching out for help.
That's good to know. That's good to know. Thank you very much, Kaylee, for this very informative discussion. Thank you for your contribution. It's a very stressful time for everybody, including our young children, and so we need to be very careful. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
No problem. It was my pleasure.
Viewers, we will take a short break and be right back to discuss the impact of the pandemic on our teens.
Pandemic has affected me when it comes to things that we're accustomed to. We have things that we already planned out and things that we're or usual then, like things that we know, like events and so that will happen, right? And then now there are a lot of protocols and we cannot do what we want to do.
Just interacting, going out, having fun, and the pandemic has everyone, locked up, so.
I would say it had a negative impact on me. I think it had a negative impact on people all over the world as well. That was something that was very terrifying for me because, you know, we were in a predicament that we did not know what would happen next. We did not know what the future has for us.
You know, it's scary as, you know, as a teen to have to go through stuff like that and having to have stuff like that happen in your country. And yes, I was scared because I didn't want to, you know, contract the virus or any of my loved ones, you know, get the virus. So it was a scary time, and, you know, I felt sorry for the people that, you know, their loved ones passed away or, you know, they contracted the virus.
I would say being home has been both a disadvantage and an advantage for me. In terms of advantages, I would say I was able to connect with my inner self. I was able to spend more time with family, and I was also able to improve skills like cooking skills and different things like that. And as it relates to disadvantage, I would say my physical health, because, you know, prior to COVID-19, I used to exercise, and, you know, you have a lot of friends, and now because we have COVID-19 and a lot of protocols are set, we cannot do things like that we were accustomed to. So then you don't have any source of motivation and any source of support to continue exercise. So yeah, I gained a couple pounds.
I would have to say being home was an advantage and a disadvantage as well, because, you know, being home, you know, I learned a lot. Like Fabian said, cooking, you know, getting to know me better, you know, having better mental health, you know, having time to myself. And disadvantages, like physical health, you know, interacting with peers. Being home alone means being by yourself or just with family members.
Well, I would say, well, not loss of job, right? But I would say my mother was laid off. I mean, when we were first under the lockdown, and it did have an effect on our family because, you know, the pay was not enough, and we had to suffice.
Nobody from my family really got laid off, but, you know, I feel for the people that it did happen to.
I would consider it difficult. I would consider the people who don't have anything to eat, people who are struggling to survive, the people who cannot provide necessities for their families, the people who have lost their job, unemployed. I would say globally it has been something that I know the whole world has been affected by.
I know certain people don't have it like everyone else, you know, being home all day eating. Some people going out was, you know, their way of getting money. Certain students used to, you know, sell certain things to eat. And I just know that, you know, it affects everyone.
My number one source that I go to is music, because, you know, music is something that helps to heal, something that helps you to get through a lot of stuff. And I have adopted to writing because, you know, like, I have been able to write down how I felt and how I feel and everything that's going on around me.
I would have to say cooking because, you know, it's very therapeutic to me. Also listening to music, doing learning new things, art, just drawing, painting, you know.
Thank you for staying tuned into the conversation. I am Carla Barnett. In this final segment, I am joined by Natalia Cardona. Natalia has a bachelor's in psychology and humanities and a master of science in applied positive psychology from the University of East London. She also has a certification in advanced counseling from the University of the West Indies. Natalia has been providing psychosocial support to youths for the past 13 years in the capacity as counselor and life skills teacher at Belmopan Comprehensive School. Welcome to the show, Natalia.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Barnett.
Oh, it's great to have you here. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Okay.
And yourself?
I am doing fine. I am doing fine. Very interesting conversation, very important conversation tonight. What has it been like offering counseling services virtually rather than in person? Tell me.
Well, like all things with changes, it has had its advantages and its disadvantages. So let me start off with the disadvantage. The disadvantage for providing virtual counseling would be you have to reach out through WhatsApp, through phone calls, in order to set up a counseling session if a referral is there. However, one of the disadvantages to that is that when you reach out, sometimes persons may decide not to respond. You might have delayed response, or some might choose not to respond at all, or you might get blocked. So that is one of the disadvantages. Okay. And also too, if you're talking about reaching out to individuals who may not have internet access or reliable internet access, that may be problematic too as well. Getting a hold of them.
What about the advantages? What may be the advantages of doing it virtually?
Yes, so the advantages of counseling online is that you can use different mediums. For example, I've used a lot of wellness check-ins, and with the wellness check-ins, I get to reach out to hundreds of students at the same time to find out where they are, how they're doing, what are they struggling with, what are some of the challenges, and then from all the data that I collect, I can say, okay, well, this person really needs a one-on-one, and that person. So I find it's an advantage that you get to reach a broader spectrum
many
of students.
more at the same time, so you can reach out to a lot more, and then when you get the responses, you can respond accordingly. What are the most common challenges that the teens at your school are experiencing as a result of the pandemic?
Okay, it's good that you say that. Thanks to the virtual counseling session, we do have actual data. So I can tell you what are some of the challenges that they are facing based on what we have on hand. And one of the major challenges is the academic overload, the adapting to teaching yourself. Because a lot of the times, like what Ms. Kaylee mentioned in the previous session, the parents may check in with the younger children, but when it comes to teens and working with an older population, they might say, okay, well, they give them more independence. And let's face it, teens have not gone to school to be teachers, to be educators, to learn how to teach themselves. So academic overload was one of the major factors, stressors. Time management and the loss of the structure that you discussed earlier was one of the second challenges. Overall stress and anxiety that goes along with being at home, and many different factors, because it's multifactorial why you may be feeling stressed. Low motivation was another high reason for challenges, followed by poor internet and accessibility and isolation as well. Also, an interesting part to note was 28% of our population is also working. So we find that teens, once you're above the age of 14 in Belize, you can work. So we have almost 30% of our population who are working as well as going to school.
Oh, the teenagers, right.
Yes.
Okay.
So that in itself causes stress.
That's a stress factor for them as well, right? Do you find that teenagers are willing to open up to discuss their stresses, what they're feeling, what they're going through? Are they willing to open up?
Yes. One of the good things is that we've already established rapport with our students from second farm to fourth farm, because we have the same student population. The first farmers were the ones that we needed to establish new rapport with. So the opening up for the second to fourth was already there. That rapport was there, so that wasn't difficult. It was just a bit challenging to be creative to establish that rapport with our new students.
Okay,
But that is where the wellness check-in all the time would come in, because we send out a lot of that, and through the life skills program, which is extremely important. I think that is something that is crucial for the overall wellness of our teens, that life skills program, thanks to this COVID, you realize the importance that the life skills session
so they're learning
plays
to
in
cope and solve their own
psychosocial.
problems, right?
Exactly. So
Right.
even those that you may not have one-on-one, you teach all these different psychosocial support skills within the life skills. So whether it's coping skills, stress management, all these different things, and all students have to take life skills. So that's an excellent thing that we have within our school system here in Belize.
Right. What has been the impact on the teens of not being able to socialize, hang out with their friends the way they normally do in a school setting and after school?
Well, as you know, during this peer period, peer connection is extremely important in establishing individuality, is important, and not being able to do that was difficult initially, I must say. Students indicated that it was initially difficult, but they eventually adapted using various social media platforms, although they do say that it's not quite the same.
Right, right. Have you had to counsel any teens who took on the stress and anxiety of a parent who loses their job, or when a family loses a loved one to COVID?
I've had a lot of referrals over this COVID period. The volume has been high, I must say. I have grief and loss of loved ones. It might not necessarily be as a result of COVID. It might be just grief and loss in general, and overall stress and anxiety. And it's a variety of different factors. And yes, some of them are COVID related as well. So for example, you might have issues of where safety in the home is a particular problem, and that is where the teens may be. And so there's many different reasons for
Right, and
referrals.
that issue was also raised in relation to the younger children as well, because school can be a safe space when home is not, and so they not being able to leave home can be a problem.
Exactly.
Right. What advice do you have for teens who may be out there who are experiencing anxiety, depression, loneliness, loss? What advice do you have for them?
Okay, well, you have to understand that stress and anxiety is a normal part of life. But if it is accumulated stress and anxiety that is for a prolonged period of time, that is when it gets problematic. And if it is for a very long period of time, then I would tell students, especially teens in Belize, every single school has a school counselor. And depending on the size of the school, there are 2 school counselors. So do not hesitate to access the free school counseling services that are available in every single high school within Belize. And the services are free, they're confidential, it's professional. And also there's various tips to relieve stressors. And that's not just for teens, but for everyone on a whole. So there's simple things that you can do: figure out, understand your stress, identify some of the sources of your stress, learn to recognize some of your little stress signals, and figure out some strategies, and come up with maybe a stress management plan. That's something that a counselor would help you to do. Self-care is the most important thing.
Self-care.
So you eat well, active, go outside, be in nature, garden. If you're a spiritual person, you pray, turn to your faith. You might use pet as therapy. You may do a digital detox. Now, this is important for teens because they tend to be on the device all the time.
What is a digital detox? I have to ask you that.
To just disconnect and unplug, because sometimes your being on the internet might be a source of your stress as well. Right? Is it a case of bullying? Is it a case of seeing? So if you're dealing with that and you're seeing so many, let's say you lose a loved one to COVID, and you're seeing all these cases going up, it could be a trigger. So sometimes you just unplug, do a digital detox,
develop positive routines since your normal routines have changed, right?
Yes, gratitude is important. To practice gratitude, even in the midst of challenges. Find the smallest thing to be grateful for, and that helps with establishing a positive mindset. You know, go to sleep early, talk to someone, laugh. Like the students mentioned, they cooked as a part of a coping mechanism. So these are.
These are things they can do. These are things they can do. Thank you very much, Natalia. Do you have any final words you'd like to share with our listeners?
No, I'm just so grateful to be a part of your show. And yes, thank you very much. And please don't hesitate to access any services, counseling services or mental health services within the country of Belize. It is important.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Thank you for the enlightening discussion.
Thank you so much.
Yes, we now take our final break. Welcome back to the final segment of the conversation for tonight. The World Health Organization has pointed out that the pandemic is increasing the demand for mental health services. Bereavement, isolation, loss of income, and fear are triggering mental health conditions or exacerbating existing ones. Many people may be facing increased levels of alcohol and drug use, insomnia, and anxiety. Viewers, we are living in a difficult and strange time, and we cannot ignore the impact that the pandemic is having on all of us. Don't be shy or ashamed to seek help if you find the stresses too much to bear. Finally, in recent weeks, many countries have been reporting an increase in pandemic fatigue, where people are feeling demotivated about following recommended behaviors to protect themselves and others from the virus. Pandemic fatigue is very much alive here in Belize, but I can only urge you to remain vigilant. Get vaccinated when it is your turn, and together, let us beat this virus. With that, our time is up for tonight. Remember to join us on Mondays at 7 p.m. for new episodes of The Conversation, right here on CBTV and on Colorblind's Facebook page. Good night and take care.